This was a really formative film for me in certain ways. The first time I saw it was when it was released in New York, which was the summer of 1993. It's a character study, but it doesn't have a traditional character arc. Daniel Auteuil's character, Stéphane, who specializes in repairing and restoring violins, he essentially has no interior life of any kind, and the way that movies work, we're sort of primed to try to delve underneath that, and we make the assumption that that's going to be upturned at some point during the film, or that we're going to discover that that's just a pose that he's putting on, and that there's really all kinds of subterranean volcanic emotions beneath the surface, and that's not true at all. It's not about this guy's emotional journey in any way. It's fundamentally about how he doesn't change, and how his refusal to change impacts the lives of the other characters around him. Primarily, this film is all about Daniel Auteuil's performance, which I think is one of the most remarkable lead performances of probably in movies, I would say. I really think he's that outstanding. What we get with Auteuil here is all surface. Really, he really is. Almost every shot of him is just a shot of him impassively observing something that's going on. It's one of the most completely shut down performances I can remember seeing. A funny thing is, this film came out in the US in 1993, right around the same time as The Remains of the Day, which is another film ostensibly about a similar kind of character. And Anthony Hopkins plays a butler who's extremely repressed and who doesn't want to show any emotion. That also, I think, is a great performance, but it's a completely different kind of great performance, because what Hopkins does is exactly what I was talking about. The character is supposed to be emotionless, but isn't at all. I mean, if you watch him act in that film, he's very volatile at all times, and you can see he does an amazing job of suggesting the idea of somebody who's controlling his emotions, while in fact being completely emotionally transparent. Auteuil does not do that at all. He really does not signal anything. He is that shut down. He completely commits to the idea of this person who essentially has no interior life and is incapable of love, and really incapable of almost any emotion apart from a certain feeling of admiration, which he has for his employer, just sort of gratitude and obedience, but that's it. And is oblivious to the harm that he's causing. This is another kind of interesting scene because she gets completely flustered by the fact that he's watching her.
Non, j'y suis pas. J'y suis pas du tout.
And it's actually only after he leaves that she's able to really continue with the rehearsal. But the intensity of his gaze is such, and because she's interpreting it in a personal way, she gets distracted and she keeps having to start over.
Vous n'avez jamais été amoureux?
Ça a dû m'arriver.
And so we're seeing how people react in a situation where the conversational and emotional cues that they're used to do not signify what we would normally think that they would signify.
Vous n'aimez pas beaucoup.
And so in that sort of a situation where somebody is watching you that intently, you automatically just assume that it's personal interest and really in this case it's just an aesthetic interest, which she understandably interprets in a sort of normal human way, of that he is interested in her. That, otherwise why would he be, actively soliciting her company? And in fact, he's not really interested in her at all. Now the question is, does he have some kind of ulterior motive?
Je vous écoute. Je vous vois.
So is he rebelling against Maxime in some way? Because, that's actually what the voiceover talks about mostly, is their professional relationship and its importance in his life.
On se connaît depuis si longtemps. On travaille ensemble, mais le patron, c'est lui.
So when the film began and it has that voiceover narration at the very beginning, I nearly fell out of my chair because I would have sworn that there was no voiceover in the film at all. Given the kind of film that it is and the degree to which this character is completely closed off from us. So when it began, I was like, what? I really was confused.
Il aime tellement gagner que pour moi, perdre devient un plaisir.
I now think that's kind of a brilliant idea because essentially what it amounts to is misdirection. And it gives us the impression that it kind of cues us into that sort of film viewing mode that I was talking about earlier. And so we think, okay, we're going to find out all about this guy and his inner life. And lo and behold, he doesn't actually have any sort of inner life. And the voiceover completely vanishes after the first maybe 2 or 3 minutes, never to return. It's so unusual to have it start off so chatty that way and then never use it again that I think it's a deliberate strategy that's designed to sort of make us believe that we're seeing a certain kind of film that this film is actually the antithesis of.
Les gens que je vois quand nous ne sommes pas ensemble, Maxime ne me pose pas de questions. Et c'est très bien comme ça.
Mais lui vous considère comme son ami.
Je peux pas l'en empêcher.
Je ne vous crois pas.
Pourquoi?
I can't think of another film where it's almost impossible to know what the main character is thinking at any given moment. The Auteuil performance is not gimmicky in any way. He's certainly not showy. In fact, it's exactly the opposite of showy. There were so many shots that are just him silently observing other people. Usually what we're asked to do is to project our own emotions onto the character. In this particular case, you run right into a brick wall because there's no real indication that he's feeling any of the things that you're feeling.
Qu'est-ce que vous voulez? Que je m'invente des raisons, des traumatismes? Une enfance malheureuse, une frustration sexuelle, une vocation suspendue? Non, je vois pas.
You could argue that he's sort of the quintessential observer who is loath to involve himself in these other people's lives in any way, apart from just watching them, which is essentially what we're doing every time we go to see a movie. The kind of person who watches rather than does, to the point of essentially, cutting himself off from everything that makes life worth living.